Hey guys, great to see you. When it comes to getting that number one most quoted scripture in your life, what is it for you? Well, we're going to talk about what it is for us coming up. Hey everybody, welcome to Breakfast with Bradley. I can tell you, God's got something special for you today. We have a special guest with us, Pastor Paul Aragon from Restoration Church, and he is bringing one of his favorite verses, one of possibly the most quoted, and he's just going to share it with us today. Pastor Paul, thank you for being here. Share with us what God has for you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing me into your home, into your life here for just a few moments. I know that the idea of having a favorite passage of Scripture can be challenging. How do you narrow down all that greatness down to one? And maybe choosing a verse is a little bit like choosing your favorite pet or your favorite child. That can be difficult. Yeah. But if push came to shove, this is my go-to verse, Brad. This is awesome. The word that I never get tired of hearing, probably the one that most naturally flows off my lips, and it is a short, sweet, simple, yet strong verse.
I love it.
It's powerful. And it's tucked away way in the Old Testament. You could easily miss over it 100 times because it's so buried back there. But it comes from the prophet Nahum, chapter 1, verse 7. And it says this: "The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he cares for those who trust in him."
Wow.
Yes,
wow, that's
just
good.
Simple and sweet, but yet so much to talk about. Early on in my faith, I heard about the goodness of God, and that was one of the things that brought me over that threshold of faith, is that he is a good God, and he cares about you and has your best interest. And I became a believer. And I never disputed that statement, but there were times when I doubted it. Yeah, like, wow. Is he really good? I know that should be the right answer, but I just don't feel that way, and my circumstances don't reflect that he's good at this point in time in life. And I think sometimes things go awry, disappointments crash in, and we question the goodness of God. I think when I look back historically over the goodness of God in my life, I didn't always see it while I was in the heat of the moment. I think about times when I did, though. Like, for example, my first ministry position was a youth pastor, and it just seemed like everything I touched turned to gold. It was just
what a great
amazing
feeling.
Yeah. And for 7 years, I was a youth pastor, and I just thought that was the norm. Hey, this is almost easy.
What happened? Tell me.
Yes. So let me contrast it with my second ministry experience. Everything I touched fell apart.
Oh, man. Yeah. Sometimes that's how it goes.
Yeah. And I began to think, man, maybe God's blessings and goodness is dependent upon the zip code in which you live. And I moved out of the right zip code to the wrong one. And it just seemed like the work was similar. Yeah. The amount of effort was similar. But just the palatable goodness of God couldn't be tasted at that time. And sometimes, I just kind of wondered, like, where is the goodness of God? But here I am, many years later, removed from ministry position number 1 that was like gold, and ministry position number 2 that fell apart. I've gone through some valleys and some stormy seas, but I've seen how the goodness of God has prevailed over my lifetime.
Wow.
And there were definitely the seasons where I might have questioned it or wondered about it. But when I see God's long-term track record, he is just so faithful.
Yeah.
And he is just so good. And he cares for us when we're in trouble. And I've really learned to try to trust him more. So now in my third ministry position, my plight is filled with goodness and sometimes not so good. But it's prepared me for what I'm doing. And I think I'm all the more convinced that he is good. And it just sometimes it takes a little bit of time to see that when we're in those challenging times in life.
That's great. That's great.
Think about the idea that we should taste and see that the Lord is good. And that means that's on us, that we've got to actually try him. We've got to give him a chance to prevail in our hearts and our lives and to demonstrate that type of goodness And it's important for us to do that, to give him a chance to be faithful and to show his goodness. Because sooner or later, we're all going to go through a hard time.
And, that's true.
Yep. And maybe not this week, maybe not this month, but at some point in time, it's coming. And when you do, you're going to be tempted, brothers and sisters, to question his goodness. So I would encourage you to latch on to Nahum 1:7. Memorize it. It's an easy one to memorize. And quote it as often as you can. And just that tasting and seeing that the Lord is good. He is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. And he cares for those who trust in him. And over time, I think he revealed himself as a good God that he is. He can't be anything less than that.
It's
That's
so
who he is.
true. And you know, it's as you say that, I mean, I think of how many times we define God's goodness by our circumstance. When now you can look back and say, maybe there was a massive plan in the hard time that I went through that was actually preparing for the goodness that you're in now.
Yes.
You know, wow, that's, you know, sometimes I think we're too quick to judge God's goodness on the moment.
Yes.
And yet, even the hard times can be for goodness that comes later.
Yes.
Man, that's good.
And just,
That's
you know,
good.
I think a good tie-in to that is when we're pruned. Boy, it hurts like crazy. We wonder why we're doing so good. But then the goodness comes when the harvest becomes tenfold. But
Right.
that pruning had to happen. And
so
at the end
true.
of the harvest, he did prove himself to be good in our hearts and in our lives.
What an encouragement today. If you feel like you're in the midst of a hard time and you just can't see God's goodness, hold on to this because it's so true. And maybe your hard time is a setup for God to bring more goodness in your life through what you're learning now. When you say that he's a refuge in time of trouble, I just think of even when it hurts and even when it's tough, we can trust in him.
Yes.
That's powerful. My friends, I know there's someone in your life that needs to hear that. Would you do me a favor, get a little courage, say a little prayer, and share this with them. It's going to really make a difference in their life. And if you haven't done it already, there's a little red button in the bottom right. You hear me say it all the time, but think of how much goodness can be brought into your life as you get continued scripture just like this for whatever God has for your day. My friends, thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing breakfast with us, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.